I still get chills when I think about that house. The long, dimly lit hallways, the towering antique furniture, and the constant feeling that I was never truly alone. I had taken the job as an au pair for a well-off family in the countryside. The Andersons were polite, welcoming, and their 6-year-old daughter, Lily, was a sweet but quiet child. It seemed like the perfect job. Free room and board in a beautiful house, decent pay, and a peaceful environment. But I soon realized that something was deeply wrong in that house. From the very first night, I felt uneasy. The house was massive, far too large for just 3 people. It was the kind of house that creaked and groaned, even when no one was moving. The walls were adorned with old paintings of people I didn't recognize, their eyes seeming to follow me as I walked down the halls. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and something else, something rotting. At first, I ignored the strange sensations, telling myself that I was just adjusting to a new place. But then, I started hearing noises coming from the attic, soft footsteps, scraping sounds like furniture being dragged across the floor. The first time I heard it, I assumed it was mice or some other small animal. When I casually mentioned it to Mrs. Anderson over breakfast, she waved it off with a smile. "Oh, don't mind that, dear. Just the house settling." But her smile was too tight, her voice too rehearsed. And when I glanced at Mr. Anderson, he kept his eyes on his plate, shoveling eggs into his mouth like he hadn't heard me. That night, I put Lily to bed and was about to turn off the lights when she grabbed my wrist. Her little fingers were cold, and when I looked into her wide, unblinking eyes, I felt a chill creep up my spine. "He likes you." I frowned. "Who likes me, sweetheart?" Lily pointed toward the ceiling. "The man in the attic." I forced a laugh, hoping she was just playing a game. "Lily, there's no man in the attic. It's just an old house making noises." She didn't respond. She just stared at me, then rolled over and went to sleep as if nothing had happened. That night, the noises got worse. The footsteps were no longer soft. They were deliberate, heavy, pacing. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. But then, thud. A loud echoing noise, like something had fallen. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Every instinct told me to stay put, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I had to check. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The attic door was just outside Lily's room. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The padlock on the latch was unhooked. I was sure I had seen it locked before. I hesitated, every nerve in my body screaming at me to go back to bed. But I needed to know. My fingers wrapped around the handle, and with a deep breath, I pushed it open. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed, my flashlight beam trembling against the dusty darkness. At first, I saw nothing but old furniture and stacked boxes. But then, in the farthest corner, my light landed on a bed. A filthy mattress covered in tattered blankets. Next to it, an empty plate and a glass of water. My stomach twisted. Someone had been living here. Then I saw the chains, rusted, bolted into the wooden floor, long enough for someone to move around a little, but not enough to escape. A wave of nausea hit me. Who had been kept up here? And were they still here? A faint rustling sound came from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight catching the briefest glimpse of something moving in the shadows. A hunched figure, crawling toward me on all fours. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My breath caught in my throat as I bolted down the attic stairs, slamming the door shut and jamming a chair under the handle. My hand shook as I struggled to catch my breath. I ran straight into Lily's room, scooping her up into my arms. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew we had to get out. I pounded on the Andersons' bedroom door, my heart racing. Mr. Anderson opened it, looking groggy and confused. "What's wrong?" I could barely form words. There's someone in the attic." For a split second, his face went pale. Then, without a word, he turned to his wife. She sighed, rubbing her temples as if this was just an inconvenience. "You weren't supposed to go up there," she muttered. I stared at her, horrified. "You knew?" She didn't answer. That's when I noticed something I had ignored before, the deep scratches on the inside of Lily's bedroom door. I quit the next morning. I didn't care about my pay or my belongings. I just packed a small bag and left, The Andersons didn't try to stop me. They just watched as I walked down the long gravel driveway, their expressions unreadable. As I glanced back at the house one last time, I saw Lily standing in the window, watching me, her little hand pressed against the glass, her lips moving. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I didn't need to. I knew. He wanted you to stay. I never went back. I don't know what the Andersons were hiding or who had been kept in that attic, but I have a sickening feeling that whoever it was is still there. I had always dreamed of traveling, and when I landed a job as an au pair for a wealthy family in France, I thought it was the opportunity of a lifetime. The Chateaus were an old aristocratic family, living in a mansion just outside Paris. The house itself was majestic, towering above the surrounding countryside, like something from a Gothic novel. It had a rich history that was evident in every corner: creaky wooden floors, centuries-old paintings, and massive chandeliers that hung like ghosts in the high ceilings. It was the kind of place that seemed to have a personality of its own, one that was both alluring and unsettling. I was hired to care for their 8-year-old son, Hugo. He was a quiet, intelligent boy, but there was something about him that made my skin crawl at times. He was withdrawn, always staring off into the distance, as if he were lost in his own world. I tried to put it down to his upbringing. He had everything, but he didn't seem to have the carefree nature of a child who was loved. His parents, Madame and Monsieur Chateau, were polite, but distant. They were formal, almost cold in their interactions with me. But I couldn't complain. The pay was generous, my room was spacious, and there were no immediate issues with the family. It seemed like the perfect job in an idyllic location. That was until I realized that the house itself was hiding secrets. From the moment I arrived, I noticed a strange feeling whenever I was inside the mansion. It wasn't just that the house was big. It was the kind of big that made you feel isolated, even if you weren't alone. The long, winding hallways seemed endless, and the walls seemed to groan in the silence. The house had an energy, an oppressive presence, that felt like it was closing in on me. But I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just adjusting to the unfamiliar environment. It wasn't until a few days later that I began to sense something more sinister. Late one evening, after I had tucked Hugo into bed and settled into my own room, I started hearing strange noises. The house creaked and groaned as old houses do, but this was different. I began hearing faint whispers, soft, unintelligible voices coming from somewhere in the dark corners of the house. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that it was just the wind or the old building settling, but there was something about the sound that didn't sit right. That night, I decided to investigate. I checked the doors and windows to ensure they were locked and secure. As I was walking back to my room, I passed by one of the old portraits hanging in the hallway. I had noticed these portraits before. They were all of aristocratic family members, their eyes following me as I walked by. But this time, I felt a strange shiver crawl up my spine as I glanced at one of them. The eyes of the woman in the portrait weren't just following me. They were staring at me, as if she knew something I didn't. I quickly turned away, trying to push the unsettling feeling out of my mind. The next day, I brought it up casually to Madame Chateau over breakfast. She just smiled and dismissed it, saying, "Oh, mademoiselle, this house has a history. The paintings and the old furniture make it feel alive, but it's nothing more than old wood and memories." Her smile was tight, and there was something in her eyes that made me feel like I wasn't supposed to ask any further questions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that evening, I was putting Hugo to bed when he suddenly turned to me with a serious expression on his face. "I don't like the attic," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "There's something up there. Someone's watching." I tried to reassure him, telling him it was probably just his imagination, but he wouldn't let it go. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on me as he continued. "They watch you at night. From the attic. I hear them move when you sleep." My heart began to race. "Who watches me, Hugo?" I asked, my voice shaky. He just shrugged, his face a mask of innocence, and said, "I don't know. But they don't like it when I talk about it." That night, the sounds from the attic were louder than ever. I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to the soft scraping noises, the faint thud of something heavy shifting in the attic. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the attic door, determined to find out the truth. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the entrance. I could hear the faint sound of breathing. Someone was up there. I pulled open the door, the wooden stairs creaking under my weight as I climbed up into the attic. The air was thick with dust, and the beams above me creaked as if they were ready to snap. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. I slowly panned the beam across the attic, but all I saw were old trunks, boxes, and forgotten furniture. Everything appeared to be just as it should be. But then I saw something that stopped me cold. A small weathered mattress tucked in the far corner of the attic. Next to it was a plate with half-eaten food, an old rusted spoon lying beside it. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. Who had been living here? I took a cautious step forward, my heart hammering in my chest, when I noticed something else. There were scratches on the wooden floor, as if someone, had been dragged across the attic. I bent down to look closer, and that's when I saw it. A small camera pointed directly at the attic stairs, as if someone had been watching me for days, or even weeks. I froze in horror. Someone had been living in the attic, hidden away, and had been watching me through the walls of the house. My blood ran cold as I realized that whoever had been up there knew everything about me, my routines, my habits, even my fears. But before I could process anything further, I heard a noise from behind me, a soft shuffling sound. I spun around, but all I saw was darkness. The air in the attic grew thick, suffocating, and I could barely breathe. Then, as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. It was quick, too quick. A hunched figure, moving silently toward me. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a rusty old lamp, and ran down the stairs, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would burst. I rushed to Hugo's room and shook him awake, telling him we were leaving. He didn't protest. He just grabbed his things, his face as pale as mine. I ran to the front door, but before I could open it, Madame Chateau appeared in the hallway. She looked at me with a strange, unreadable expression. "You don't have to leave," she said softly. "You've just uncovered something you weren't meant to see. But it's too late now. You're already part of it." I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. I grabbed Hugo and ran, out into the cold night, leaving everything behind. I don't know if the figure in the attic ever got out, or if the Chateau family was involved in whatever was going on in that house. But one thing is certain. There was something living in the walls of that mansion, and I'm certain it wasn't just the house that was haunted. I left France the very next day, and to this day, I can't shake the feeling that whatever was in that attic, watching me, is still there, and that somehow, it's still watching. Not for the minute. Being an au pair had always seemed like the perfect job to me. I wanted to experience life in Europe, take care of children, and immerse myself in a different culture. So when I was hired by the wealthy Pierce family in the small town of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in southern France, I was thrilled. Their home was an old manor on the outskirts of town, perched on a hill surrounded by vineyards and lavender fields. The house itself was charming, full of character, with stone walls, antique furniture, and a beautiful garden. It seemed like a dream job. Little did I know, my dream would soon turn into a nightmare. The family consisted of two parents, the Pierces, and their daughter, Camille, who was 10 years old. Camille was a sweet, energetic girl, but she often seemed distant, as though there was something on her mind that she wasn't sharing. Her parents were kind, but they kept to themselves, often retreating to their study or the garden for long periods. As the days went by, I began to notice odd things around the house, small details that I couldn't quite explain. One afternoon, while Camille was at school, I decided to do some cleaning around the house. The rooms were massive, and I spent hours dusting and vacuuming. I was in the hallway near the back of the house when I came across an old door that I had never noticed before. It was hidden behind a large tapestry, barely noticeable unless you were looking closely. The door was old, with brass handles tarnished by time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to open it. To my surprise, the door led to a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was musty, and the floor was covered in dust. It looked like no one had been inside for years. The walls were lined with shelves, but instead of books or decorations, they were filled with old boxes, broken furniture, and forgotten trinkets. The room felt cold and lifeless, a stark contrast to the warmth of the rest of the house. As I looked around, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about the room felt off. It was as if it had been sealed for a reason I wasn't supposed to know. I quickly shut the door and covered it up with the tapestry, trying to push the unsettling feeling out of my mind. The next day, I mentioned the hidden room to Madame Pierce, hoping to get some clarification. Her response was not what I expected. "Oh, that room," she said with a forced smile. "It's been closed for many years. We don't go in there. It's a family thing, a part of the house we try to forget." Her tone was dismissive, but I could tell there was something in her eyes. Something dark, something she didn't want to acknowledge. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the room. It was as if the house itself was hiding something, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something I shouldn't have. Later that evening, after Camille had gone to bed, I decided to investigate further. I waited until the house was quiet, the sounds of the family retreating to their respective rooms. My heart pounded as I walked down the hallway to the tapestry-covered door. I could hear my own breath echoing in the silence. This time, I opened the door slowly, my hand trembling as I turned the handle. The room was just as I had left it, cold, dark, and filled with old relics. But this time, there was something new. On one of the shelves, there was a small wooden box. It was intricately carved, with symbols I didn't recognize. It seemed out of place, almost as if it had been placed there recently. I couldn't resist. I reached for the box, my fingers brushing against the smooth wood. When I opened it, I gasped. Inside the box were several old photographs, faded black and white images of the Pierce family. But something was wrong with them. They didn't look like normal family photos. The people in the pictures had blank expressions, their eyes wide and vacant, and there was an eerie, unnatural stillness to their faces. The photos were all taken in the same room, the hidden room itself. But the most disturbing photo of all was the last one. It was a picture of Camille, the young girl I was supposed to be looking after. In the photograph, she was sitting in the exact same corner of the room, but her eyes were completely black, empty, soulless, and devoid of any emotion. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized what I was seeing. This wasn't just a family photo album. It was a record of something much darker. I closed the box quickly and shoved it back on the shelf, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I needed to leave the room, but just as I turned to exit, I heard something. A faint whisper, barely audible, like the wind blowing through the cracks in the walls. But there was no wind. It was coming from inside the room. I froze. I turned back toward the room, my heart racing in my chest. The temperature had dropped, and the air was thick with something unspoken. Then I saw it, a shadow moving in the corner of the room, just at the edge of my vision. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the shadow seemed to move, growing larger, more defined. I could see the outline of something, or someone, standing in the corner, just watching me. The whisper grew louder, and it sounded like a voice, soft but clear. It was calling my name. "Sarah!" I screamed, spinning on my heels and running out of the room. I slammed the door shut behind me, panting heavily, my heart racing in my chest. I leaned against the door, trying to collect myself. But as I stood there, trying to calm my breathing, I heard it. The soft sound of footsteps from inside the room. Slow, deliberate steps, as if someone was walking across the floor, getting closer and closer to the door. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I ran down the hallway, out of the house, and into the night. I didn't even stop to grab my coat. My mind was reeling, and all I could think was that I had uncovered something that was never meant to be seen. The next morning, I went to Madame Pierce and told her everything. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and regret. She didn't deny anything, but instead told me that the room and the box had been there for generations. The Pierce family, she said, had a dark history, one that involved secrets best left hidden. She never explained what exactly was in that room, but I knew enough. Camille wasn't just a normal little girl. She had been involved in something far more sinister than I could comprehend. I left the Pierce family the next day, unable to shake the images of that hidden room and the shadow that still seemed to follow me. To this day, I don't know what I encountered in that house. All I know is that some secrets are better left untouched, and some doors should never be opened.